And now they're making a movie about Leonard Bernstein, and Bradley Cooper is playing him. I mean, if he can get through the picket lines. You see, like Rachel Brosnahan playing Mrs. Maisel and Helen Mirren playing Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir. Bradley is, sadly, a Gentile. And that's the new sin in Hollywood, being a non-Jewish actor portraying a Jew. Because that's always been the problem in Hollywood, not enough Jews. Eddie Redmayne played a transgender woman in The Danish Girl, but now calls that a mistake because many people don't have a chair at the table. Well, actually, in movies now, they do. And what does it have to do with you playing trans? Does it then work the other way? Can trans actors only play trans characters? Because that's not going to be a good deal for them.
And now they're making a movie about Leonard Bernstein, and Bradley Cooper is playing him. I mean, if he can get through the picket lines, you see like Rachel Brosnahan playing Mrs. Maisel and Helen Mirren playing Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir. Bradley is sadly, music, a Gentile, and that's the new sin in Hollywood, being a non-Jewish actor portraying a Jew, because that's always been the problem in Hollywood, not enough Jews. Eddie Redmayne played a transgender woman in The Danish Girl, but now calls that a mistake because many people don't have a chair at the table. Well, actually, in movies now, they do. And what does it have to do with you playing trans? Does it then work the other way? Can trans actors only play trans characters? 'Cause that's not going to be a good deal for them.
Every other movie that comes out, all of which are made by liberals, for liberals, with ardent liberal intent, fall short. If the movie is about poverty, the director didn't grow up poor enough to understand it. If it's about being gay, it's not gay enough. Asian, not Asian enough. Female, not enough agency. Race, don't even try. Sidelining, whitewashing, colorism, white saviorism. No amount of virtue signaling is ever virtuous enough. But somehow, 96% of film critics love Top Gun like a Catholic priest loves Sleepaway.
There's a reason so many people walk out of modern movies feeling absolutely nothing. And no, it's not because audiences suddenly got harder to impress. It's because Hollywood has become obsessed with everything around storytelling except the storytelling itself. Instead of asking the one question that used to matter most, is this good? The industry now seems trapped in a permanent audition for moral approval. And the result is exactly what you'd expect. Stiff scripts, cautious casting, fake emotion, and movies that feel less like entertainment and more like homework with a marketing budget. If you're tired of that too, hit like, subscribe, and stick around because this whole mess says a lot more about Hollywood than Hollywood wants to admit. What Bill Maher tapped into here is something regular moviegoers have been feeling for years. There's this growing frustration that movies are no longer allowed to simply be movies.
Is that what diversity and inclusion look like now? Everybody's staying in their lane? Lawrence of Arabia was gay. Peter O'Toole wasn't. I can live with that because he was so cool, he almost made me gay. Emma Stone caught hell for playing a Hawaiian, Jake Gyllenhaal for playing a Persian, Gal Gadot for wanting to play Cleopatra, Johnny Depp for playing an Indian, even though he's not an actual Comanche, and spoiler alert, he also doesn't really have scissor hands.
Every project has to survive a gauntlet of ideological inspections before it even reaches the screen. Is it diverse enough? Is it authentic enough? Is it careful enough? Is it speaking for the right people in the right way with the right approved language at the right moment in history? And even after studios bend over backwards to satisfy all of that, it still somehow isn't enough. That's the punchline. The people who demand all these rules rarely seem satisfied by the product those rules create. Think about how bizarre that is. Hollywood keeps chasing approval from a crowd that treats satisfaction like a moving target. One minute the complaint is that movies lack representation. Then representation shows up, but now it's the wrong kind or not enough or framed incorrectly or centered through the wrong character or written by the wrong person or directed with the wrong perspective. There is always another layer to the complaint, another purity test, another reason the movie failed morally before anybody even asks whether it succeeded artistically. And after a while, you start to realize this was never really about making better art. It was about controlling the terms of the conversation. Every other movie that comes out all of which are made by liberals for liberals with ardent liberal intent, music falls short. If the movie is about poverty, the director didn't grow up poor enough to understand it. If it's about being gay, it's not gay enough. Asian, not Asian enough. Female, not enough agency. Laughter race, don't even try. Sidelining, whitewashing, colorism, white saviorism. No amount of virtue signaling is ever virtuous enough. But somehow 96% of film critics love Top Gun like a Catholic priest loves Sleepaway Camp. That's why so many big-budget movies now feel weirdly hollow. They're not built from instinct anymore. They're built from caution. You can almost feel the committee notes dripping off the screen. Every line sounds scrubbed. Every character feels like they were focus grouped by HR. Every conflict is arranged so carefully that nobody is allowed to be too human, too flawed, too funny, too dangerous, or too real. And when movies stop feeling real, audiences notice. They may not write think pieces about it. They may not use industry jargon, but they know when a film has no pulse. They know when they're being nudged, managed, and lectured instead of pulled into a story. And then you get to the casting issue, which is where the whole thing really starts to wobble because now we're being asked to pretend acting is no longer acting. Suddenly, the unwritten rule is that actors should only play versions of themselves, or at least stay within some narrow border around their own biography. Is that what diversity and inclusion look like now? Everybody's staying in their lane. Lawrence of Arabia was gay. Peter Owl wasn't. I can live with that because he was so cool. He almost made me gay. Emma Stone caught hell for playing a Hawaiian. Jake Gyllenhaal for playing a Persian. Gal Gadot for wanting to play Cleopatra. Johnny Depp for playing an Indian, even though he's not an actual Comanche. And spoiler alert, he also doesn't really have scissor hands. If a character is gay, only a gay actor should play them. If a character is trans, only a trans actor should play them. If a character belongs to a certain ethnicity, religion, or culture, the actor had better present matching paperwork to the online tribunal. And at that point, what exactly are we doing here? That's not a performance standard. That's identity paperwork with wardrobe. The whole magic of acting is transformation. It's the ability to make you forget the person and believe the character. That's the trick. That's the craft. That's why people revere the greats. Nobody praises a performance because the actor happened to be identical to the role on paper. They praise it because the actor disappeared. Tom Hanks now says that if Philadelphia were made today, he wouldn't do it because music, the character was gay, and he's not. Well, besides the fact that this would force all gay actors to reveal their sexuality, even if they didn't want to, great actors, which Tom is one, try hard to keep their private lives private, so we don't think of their real lives when we see them in a movie that attempts, music, to transport us into a different world. Could you really look at this actress now, laughter, and not think of the trial? Should she only play bed now? Daniel Day-Lewis doesn't work because viewers sit there thinking, wow, his personal demographic profile really aligns with this material. He works because he vanishes into the part. That's the entire point. If the highest standard in acting becomes autobiographical accuracy, then acting itself gets downgraded into little more than highly paid self-expression. And let's be honest, the logic behind this trend falls apart in about 5 seconds. If only trans actors can play trans roles, do trans actors then get limited to only trans roles? If only gay actors can play gay characters, are gay actors boxed into one category forever? If only people with exact lived experience can portray certain struggles, what happens to imagination? What happens to empathy? What happens to the entire idea that art lets us step into other people's lives and understand something beyond ourselves? The ideology claims to be expanding understanding, but in practice, it shrinks everybody into tiny boxes and then warns them not to step out. What's Daniel Day-Lewis really like? I haven't a clue, which is why he's so great. Because when he plays Lincoln, I only see Lincoln. I don't think, well, there's a British heterosexual. Laughter, but Hank says I don't think people would accept the inauthenticity of a straight guy playing a gay guy because music, quote, we're beyond that now. Don't get them started on bosom buddies. That's what makes Maher's broader point land so hard. This isn't progress in the old liberal sense. It's regression dressed up in progressive language. Real liberalism used to value empathy. It encouraged people to imagine life from another person's point of view. It saw art as a bridge. Now, a lot of the loudest cultural voices treat that very instinct as suspicious. Don't imagine my experience. Don't portray my experience. Don't interpret my experience.
Stay in your lane. Tell your own story.
Cast your own type. Wear your own costume. Touch nothing outside your assigned category. That isn't openness. That's segregation with better branding. And nowhere is that more obvious than in the endless double standards. One actor gets dragged for stepping into a role outside their identity, while another gets a free pass because the politics line up correctly. One choice gets framed as harmful appropriation. Another gets celebrated as bold artistic freedom. Same basic act, completely different judgment.
Why?
Because the rules are not actually rules. They're weapons. They're applied selectively, emotionally, and usually in whatever direction gives the outrage machine something fresh to chew on for 24 hours. That's why so many people have stopped taking the whole performance seriously. They can smell the inconsistency from a mile away. Does Forrest Gump get thrown under the bus? 2. Because Tom isn't really mentally challenged. And as far as we're beyond that, no. No, that implies progress. This is the opposite. This is regression. Applause and its end, it is frankly typical of so much wokeness that doesn't build on liberalism. It undoes it. Empathy. Music, putting yourself in someone else's place so you can understand them better, used to be the very heart of liberalism. Music, now it's considered offensive because don't even try to put yourself in my shoes because you could never know. Take the Bradley Cooper controversy over Leonard Bernstein. The loudest criticism wasn't about whether he could act. Nobody seriously doubts Bradley Cooper can act. The outrage was about what he is allowed to act as. Sit with that for a second. Not whether he could capture Bernstein's charisma, intensity, genius, or contradictions. Not whether he could carry the emotional weight of the role. The problem apparently was that he is not Jewish. So what are we doing now? Turning casting into ancestry verification? Replacing performance with bloodline arithmetic? That is such a dead-end way to think about art that it almost sounds like parody. And the irony is brutal. Hollywood keeps claiming it wants more freedom, more expression, more boundary breaking, more bold creativity. But the rules being pushed here do the exact opposite. They make the industry smaller, safer, and more afraid. Great actors start hesitating before taking complex roles. Studios start casting defensively. Writers start simplifying characters so they don't trigger controversy. Directors start shaping entire projects around backlash avoidance. And now they're making a movie about Leonard Bernstein, and Bradley Cooper is playing it. I mean, if he can get through the picket lines. You see, like Rachel Brosnahan playing music, Mrs. Missile, and Helen Mirren playing Israeli Prime Minister Golden May. Bradley is sadly music a Gentile. And that's the new sin in Hollywood, being a non-Jewish actor portraying a Jew, because that's always been the problem in Hollywood, not enough Jews. And the audience gets the final watered-down product and is told to applaud the moral effort, even if the movie itself is flat as cardboard. That's a terrible trade. Regular people are not buying tickets because they want to witness a successful compliance exercise. They're buying tickets because they want to feel something. They want to laugh. They want to be shocked. They want to cry at something honest. They want to leave the theater talking about the characters, the performances, the twists, the lines they can't stop repeating. They do not want to leave discussing whether the casting department submitted the proper ideological paperwork. That conversation exists almost entirely because Hollywood and its media ecosystem keep trying to force it into the center. What a bunch of that always was. Of course, no one can ever know exactly what another person's struggle is, but we try. Black Like Me was a 1950s book about a white man who darkened his skin and went out into society because he wanted to understand what his black brothers and sisters were up against. Today, all the woke mob would see about that was a guy, music, who did blackface. Steven Spielberg recently remade West Side Story and bent over backwards to respect ethnicities and ended up pleasing nobody. And it's too bad because the original musical was created by Stephen Sondheim, Arthur Laurent, and Leonard Bernstein. 3 gay Jews. And that's another reason the movie experience feels weaker now. The audience can sense when they are not the main customer anymore. The customer is the online reaction cycle. The customer is the critic class. The customer is the professional outrage industry waiting to grade every decision against a moral rubric that changes every week. So instead of making films for human beings who want to be entertained, moved, and surprised, studios increasingly make films for people who want to audit them. You can feel that anxiety in the final product. It hangs over everything like a wet blanket. The saddest part is that Hollywood already knows what works. It knows audiences respond to strong stories, compelling characters, and fearless performances. It knows people will show up for authenticity in the emotional sense, not the bureaucratic sense. They want truth in the performance, not literal sameness between actor and character. That's why classic films still endure. Nobody treasures them because they passed a purity checklist. They treasure them because they were unforgettable. Because the acting was electric, because the writing took risks, because the films trusted audiences to handle complexity without needing a moral instruction label slapped on the poster. The woke even have a word for this troubling new phenomenon: Jewface. Do you see what I mean about them having their head up there? Really? The word you're using to fight anti-Semitism is Jewface. Laughter, it sounds like something Mel Gibson says at a traffic stop. And yes, some people will hear that and immediately say, so representation doesn't matter. That's not the argument. Of course, representation matters. Of course, new voices matter. Of course, different communities deserve opportunities, visibility, and access. But that goal gets corrupted when it turns into artistic policing. Opportunity is not the same thing as censorship by social pressure. Inclusion is not the same thing as demanding that imagination stay inside identity borders. You can open doors without chaining artists to categories. You can broaden the industry without turning every casting decision into a courtroom drama on social media. Because once you normalize that mindset, it never stops. It just keeps slicing people into smaller and smaller identity fragments, each one requiring its own approval process. Not just race, not just sexuality, not just gender, religion, nationality, disability, body type, background, class, trauma, accent, ideology. The list never ends. And no art form survives that kind of suffocation. Storytelling needs room to breathe. It needs people who are curious enough to enter lives unlike their own. It needs actors bold enough to attempt transformation. It needs directors willing to trust talent over trend. Eddie Redham played music a transgender woman in The Danish Girl, but now calls that a mistake because many people don't have a chair at the table. Well, actually, in movies now they do. And what does it have to do with you playing trans? Does it then work the other way? Can trans actors only play trans characters? 'Cause that's not going to be a good deal for them. Far's frustration connects because it speaks to something bigger than Hollywood. People are exhausted by a culture that treats every human interaction like a minefield and every creative decision like a political referendum. They are tired of the smug certainty, the selective outrage. The way common sense gets shouted down by people who mistake fragility for virtue. And they're especially tired of being told that obvious decline is actually enlightened progress.
No.
If movies are getting more expensive, more self-important, and less memorable, something is broken. Pretending otherwise doesn't fix it. What fixes it is courage. The courage to cast the best actor. The courage to write flawed characters. The courage to tell stories that are messy, funny, contradictory, and human. The courage to stop apologizing for the basic premise of performance itself. Let actors act. Let writers write. Let directors direct. Let audiences decide whether the final result works. That used to be the arrangement. And somehow the art form survived. More than survived, it thrived. It gave us classics. It gave us stars. It gave us movies that lived in the culture for decades instead of disappearing by the following weekend. So maybe it's time for Hollywood to remember what made people fall in love with movies in the first place. It wasn't ideological obedience. It wasn't panic-driven casting. It wasn't the thrill of watching a studio avoid getting yelled at online. It was the escape, the connection, the feeling of seeing a story come alive through pure talent and craft. It was sitting in the dark and forgetting yourself for 2 hours because the people on screen were that believable, that powerful, that good. That magic is not gone forever. But Hollywood will keep missing it until it stops treating art like a social compliance seminar and starts treating it like art again. Put the best people in the roles. Trust the audience. Stop bowing to every manufactured outrage cycle. And for the love of cinema, make movies people actually want to watch instead of movies executives hope will survive the timeline. That's the challenge. That's the fix. And honestly, it's not even complicated. The formula isn't new. Great talent, great story, great execution. Everything else is noise. And maybe that's why this conversation hits such a nerve. Because underneath all the sarcasm and all the controversy is one brutally simple truth. Audiences can tell when Hollywood has lost confidence in its own craft. They can tell when fear is driving the decisions. They can tell when a movie is trying to impress the culture police instead of telling a compelling story, and they're done pretending not to notice. So, here's the real question. Will Hollywood wake up before it drives even more people away? Or will it keep chasing approval from people who can never be satisfied? Let me know what you think in the comments because this debate is nowhere near over. And if you enjoyed this, subscribe for more because we've got plenty more to say about the entertainment industry's slow-motion identity crisis. And real quick before you go, if you want more direct political coverage and fast breakdowns of the biggest news stories, I've got a new channel called Blue Check News. Head over there, subscribe, and I'll see you on that channel, too. You will find the link in the description.